What breaks a man faster in a world of dragons, elves, and beastmen? Not the monsters, the rent. Lancelot just pushed a sword style called Mud Sword Fight up to level 3, and after months of hiding behind a guild counter, that finally makes him eligible to register as an adventurer. The most careful man in Grey Rock Town, the one with 3 rules he never breaks, is about to step out from behind his desk. Drop your own survival rule in the comments, and if you want to watch the first rule snap, you know exactly what to tap. Lancelot blew out a long breath and set the sweat-soaked wooden training sword back on the rack like it weighed nothing. His chest heaved hard a few times, but the stamina he'd just burned down to the bone came flooding back in the space of a few breaths. I finally hit the standard to register as an adventurer. One thought, and a pale blue, semi-transparent panel bloomed into place in front of his eyes. The details on his swordsmanship entry popped up right away. Castro Swordsmanship 55-3, Skilled. The standard issue swordsmanship of the Iris Kingdom's 3rd Legion. Everybody just calls it Mud Sword Fight. It comes out of the Border Army's 4th manual, built for one job only, cutting down leather-armored beastmen in muddy trenches. Underneath that plain, unglamorous sword skill sat a few sad little auxiliary skills. Common Language Reading and Writing 55-3, Skilled. Arithmetic 55-4, Mastery. Lance looked at that pathetic skill tree and couldn't help pulling a face. Nothing I could have done about it. These were the bread and butter skills he'd picked up over the past few months, doing nothing more ambitious than surviving at the Adventurers Guild. Several months back, not long after he was dumped into this other world, Lance confirmed the important part, that this place really did have fire-breathing giant dragons, pointy-eared elves, and thick-skulled beastmen who loved violence a little too much. So he laid down 3 ironclad rules on the spot. Never get involved in a commotion, never meddle in other people's business, never go out after dark. Not because he was born a coward, because it was a lesson written in blood, one the body's original owner paid for with his life. This border town was called Grey Rock Town. It sat right beside the resource-rich Copper Creek Forest, with a small underground city maze not far off, which turned it into a paradise for adventurers. The streets ran wide and shops lined them shoulder to shoulder. Any given day you'd see warriors clanking past in heavy plate armor and casters hauling around magic staffs far too big for them. Merchant caravans rolled through non-stop, and the air carried the smell of ale and the crisp little clink of gold coins. All that commercial buzz kept countless people fed. The body's original owner made his living writing letters home for adventurers who couldn't read or write. Those men lived and died by the sword, and they always had something they wanted to send back, to family, to a lover waiting somewhere. The original owner's father was a veteran, dead now, and that connection got him a solid discount on postage through the Veterans Guild. He pocketed the difference. But crime always festers in the shadow of prosperity. One dark, windy night, the original owner stayed out just a little too late, greedy for 1 extra rush fee. So a wandering thief spotted him, and that was it. 1/done. And that's how the Lance standing here today came to be. What a pitiful way to go, honestly. In his old life, Lance was a 9-to-5 office drone who wrote game reviews on the side. That day, he was hammering away at his keyboard, banging out a review for some game that had just dropped. How was he supposed to know his PC case would short out? Everything went black. Next thing he knew, he'd been dumped in another world. The part that still makes his toes curl with pure secondhand shame? The game page still sitting open on his monitor. Never got the chance to close it. Months have gone by since he landed here, and he still can't shake it. Just picturing what his family will see once they get that computer repaired makes Lance want to dig a hole somewhere in this other world and climb inside. Well, I'm here now. Might as well make it work. He'd taken notes on how the original Lance died, so he dropped the letter-writing gig immediately. No more wandering the streets for him. He fished out a little pouch of silver coins the original owner had stashed in a gap between the floorboards, the one thing the thief had missed. Then he ditched the rented place he'd been living in and found somewhere safer, closer to the busy part of town. He also shamelessly reached out to a handful of his father's old comrades in arms. A few favors pulled, a few palms greased, and he landed himself a steady job as a copyist at the Adventurers Guild. The work was mind-numbing, but its biggest selling point? Safety. All he had to do was tuck himself behind a thick counter and copy out newly posted quests or log changes to adventurer party registrations. He didn't even have to deal with the crude adventurers and their bottomless supply of filthy jokes the way the receptionist did. Dull, sure, but the money came in like clockwork, 50 copper coins a day, every day. For some context, at the Wild Boar and Rose, the tavern right next door to the guild, a proper dinner, big slab of roasted meat, tall foaming mug of ale, ran you 8 copper coins. You had to admit it, anything even loosely connected to adventurers printed money. Being a copyist meant Lance saw every fresh quest and every juicy rumor before almost anyone else. It was a sensitive seat to sit in, and plenty of information brokers with bad intentions came sniffing around, trying to pry things loose from him. But Lance lived by one rule and one rule only: survival above all. His mouth stayed shut like it had been stitched together, and he kept his head down so far he was basically furniture, which, funnily enough, made everyone love him. Colleagues, adventurers, all of them said the same thing. That kid's solid, grounded, dependable. And so the days rolled by, flat and still as a pond. Every day, Lance sat at his counter and listened to the adventurers brag on the other side of it. One day it's a party striking secret silver ore on the 3rd floor of the underground city, rich overnight, packing up for a Gulf city to buy themselves a brand new base. The next, it's some lucky idiot who rescues a lone elf ranger out on an expedition and walks away with a reward and a girlfriend. Lance heard it all and felt absolutely nothing. If anything, it was kind of funny to him. He didn't envy the gamblers who traded their lives for coin. His goal was simple and small: stay alive a few more years and put away 10 gold coins. After that, he'd ride out with Grey Rock Town's biggest merchant caravan, all the way to Ostrara, the richest trade capital on the East Coast. Word was that in the high-class lounges there, you could find fox maids with fluffy fox ears. There were forest elves, famous across the whole continent for their beauty. There were succubus sisters, with heart-tipped tails and eyes that smoldered. There was even a siren songstress, with long azure hair, a voice that could smooth out every wrinkle in your soul. And if luck was really on his side, he might even run into one of those proud, fiery, dragon-blooded maidens. Lance's wish was a small one: find an alien girl, the kind that had only ever lived in his daydreams back in his old life, open a little business, and coast through this life in peace and quiet. But right when he was sure that quiet life would stretch on forever, fate leaned in and played a very ugly joke on him. Maybe his golden finger just needed a month to sync up with the laws of this world, because on the 1-month anniversary of his transmigration, that attribute panel, the one he knew well enough to despair over, snapped into place across his retina, arriving with the crackle and pop of live electricity. This is from the game that electrocuted me and dumped me here. Name: Lance Lott. Profession: none. Power: 4. Agility: 5. Constitution: 4. Spirit: 7. Perception: 6. Utterly forgettable numbers, a flawless match for what he was now: an ordinary clerk. Only that one blood-red line at the very bottom, his talent, sat there screaming for attention. Description: Hevigmir, the world spring located in Niflheim in Nordic mythology. Effect: your stamina will be as inexhaustible as this source of the world, surging endlessly. No matter how strenuous the exertion, it can be rapidly restored through simple breathing. Additional effect: due to a mutated constitution, your sensitivity to pain and abnormal statuses will be greatly reduced. Lance read that description and his mouth twitched. You'd better be talking about the normal kind of sensitivity. There is nothing respectable about this talent. This was built from the ground up so the game's protagonist could go on a rampage. A one-of-a-kind constitution. Lance. In the common tongue, the name meant a long, sharp spear. It was his late father's greatest blessing on him, a hope that his son would live up to it and carve out a future in this fucked-up world. But, staring at the jaw-dropping talent panel floating in front of him, Lance slid straight into some serious self-doubt. So God never meant for me to be a hero? I was supposed to grow up into the legendary Ghost King instead? In this world, talents weren't some private thing Lance alone had. Beyond the talents handed out by professions and the ones carried in special bloodlines, there was a third kind, rarer than both, the personal talent. One per lifetime at most, and only if you awakened it at all. Their quality was sorted with no room for argument into 5 levels: ordinary, excellence, extraordinary, legendary, and mythic. And that glaring red on the panel? Lance had no doubt at all. That was mythic. He was a little embarrassed about where this talent had come from, but he couldn't pretend otherwise. The thing was powerful enough to break the game wide open. Calling it overpowered didn't even cover it. As long as he kept breathing, his stamina came all the way back, which meant that as long as his spirit held together, he could train without end, sharpening himself at a pace no mortal was ever supposed to reach. You have to understand, even veteran adventurers were often forced into a scrambling retreat from the crushing pressure of an underground city simply because their stamina ran dry. But Lance, with this talent in hand, only ever had to worry about 2 things: whether his health bar was long enough and whether his backpack was big enough. He would be a perpetual motion machine that never knew what fatigue felt like. Maybe I could give it a shot too? And just as that spark of ambition caught fire in Lance's chest, just as he started seriously weighing a profession change to adventurer, reality slapped him square across the face. The next afternoon, terrible news came down from the Adventurers Guild. The underground city outside of town had suffered a magic power rampage with no warning at all, and hundreds of adventurers exploring inside had died there. The disaster didn't just swallow hundreds of vibrant lives. It went straight for the economic lifeblood of Grey Rock Town. With that big spending crowd of adventurers suddenly gone, the town's service industry dropped into a brutal winter overnight. The most immediate consequence for Lance? His daily food expenses went up by 2 copper coins. Worse than that, his workload exploded. As a copyist, he was working overtime to process hundreds of death notices, and in the gaps between all that mechanical copying, letters kept arriving, mailed from faraway places. Except the people they were addressed to would never get the chance to open them. While sorting through the effects of the dead, Lance came across a name he knew. A young adventurer, one he'd served back in the days when he ran a side business writing letters for people. When nobody was watching, Lance quietly opened the reply that would never be claimed. The paper was coarse, the handwriting crooked and clumsy. Inside, an old farmer rambled on, bursting with pride that his son had become an adventurer, promising him that everything back home was fine. The letter mentioned his younger brother, who kept leaning against the windowsill asking when his big brother was coming back. He wanted to know if Grey Rock Town really had those airships with the giant gas bags and propellers, and whether they could truly fly above the clouds. At the end of the letter came his mother's slightly clumsy reminder. She said that every silver coin her son had sent home over the years, the family hadn't dared to spend a single one. They'd saved them all. If you get tired out there, just come home. The money they'd put away was more than enough for him to marry a pretty wife. Every single line was soaped through with his parents' thick, aching longing for the son so far from home. As Lance read, his vision blurred. He couldn't get any further. And right there, in that moment, the dream of adventure that had only just started to burn was snuffed out completely by a letter from home. Maybe the only thing that red talent really changed was his retirement plans. He'd originally pictured marrying a fox girl with fox ears, or a delicate, fragile elf. Now he was also entertaining a high-demand succubus, or a physically robust dragon-blooded maiden with astounding stamina. That was all. Life in Grey Rock Town flowed on, carrying its sorrow with it. The rampaging underground city eventually settled down, and Grey Rock Town crawled its way back to its old prosperity. New adventurers poured in to fill the empty space, and it seemed like nobody remembered the dead anymore. With one exception. Lance quietly pulled out more than half of the salary he'd saved that month and tucked it into the envelope with the man's death notice. Ordinary low-ranking adventurers got no death benefits. That privilege belonged to those who'd made it to professional. It was a small thing, an insignificant bit of help, the only kind Lance could offer a family he would never meet. Once it was done, Lance slapped his own right hand hard with his left. Ugh, you and your useless sympathy. The money he'd just thrown away meant one thing. His dream of reaching Ostrara had to wait a little longer. For the next 3 months, life settled back into quiet. Leaning on his handsome, harmless-looking face, Lance worked his way into the little social circle of the guild's receptionist, Nia. Nia had long, smooth brown hair, a tall figure, and the unofficial title of the guild's beauty. Through her, Lance met 2 other girls, and the 2 of them couldn't have been more different. One was Amber, the tavern's poster girl. Dazzling golden-red short hair, a bust you physically could not look away from, and a personality as spicy as it was blunt. The other was Flora from the town's potion shop. She wore her hair in braids, kept quiet, and spoke in a soft, gentle voice. The 4 of them got together whenever they had free time to play a game called 3 Dragon Card, with rules close to the poker Lance remembered from his previous life. To claw back the money he'd given away, Lance turned brutally stingy about food and drink, usually buying the hardest, cheapest black bread just to shut his stomach up. Flora noticed. She started slipping him honey-glazed croissants on the sly, blushing as she insisted she'd been practicing her baking. It had gone badly that day, and she simply had to hand them off for him to deal with. And whenever he showed up at the tavern, the busty Amber would drop a big glass of warm milk onto his cheap meal set. Then she'd tease him in front of the whole room, saying a little boy needed plenty of milk to grow up big and strong. And every time the adventurers in the tavern roared with laughter at that, Amber would grab a huge wooden mug, slam it down on the table, and chew out that pack of rough men like a mother bear guarding her cub. Bit by bit, Lance built himself a reputation in Grey Rock Town, along with a nickname that left him somewhere between laughing and crying. That pretty boy copyist. Lance couldn't have cared less. He happily counted his growing stack of copper coins every day, played cards with the girls now and then, and mooched some good food off them while he was at it. Nia would also dig up side jobs for him sometimes, writing letters home for people who couldn't, so he could pocket a little extra. Watching his savings creep upward, it felt like his dream had moved one more step closer. Aretia, though, this world's goddess of talent, courage, and adventure, clearly had no plans to let him off that easy. Another month passed. Then, late one night, that erratic, short-circuiting panel popped up again, with no warning at all. By all logic, a personal talent should be one of a kind. But maybe it was Lance's soul, the soul of a transmigrator, something special. After a long 4-month gestation, a second line of bright red text slowly surfaced. Description: Ouroboros, the great serpent of legend that bites its own tail, symbol of the eternal cycle and of immortality. Effect: 1 flawless resurrection per day. No matter how thoroughly your body is destroyed, even reduced to nothing at all, you will reassemble yourself and return to life in perfect condition. Additional: on resurrection, every negative status is wiped clean, and every ability on cooldown resets to 0. Lance had been lying in bed, halfway to sleep, when his eyes snapped wide open. He stared at the translucent pale blue panel hovering in the dark in front of him, his head filling up with curses he didn't dare say out loud. That filthy little game I played in bed? It actually followed me here? Stamina that never runs dry, plus the ability to pop back to full health on the spot, even if you get caught in the middle of a sholo scene with several women at once. Put those 2 talents together and you've got the perfect protagonist template. And Lance could feel it clearly, that short-circuiting sensation from the panel, the one that flickered like a bad wire, was gone. Completely gone. Which meant the system had stabilized. His personal cheat had finally, truly finished loading. And yet, staring at this deluxe setup, Lance didn't look thrilled. If anything, there was a flicker of conflict on his face. This talent was like a devil with an obscene figure, leaning in close, whispering, daring him to step out into that unknown and very dangerous world. Lance sighed, climbed out of bed, pulled a pen and paper from his drawer, and started doing the math. Per his original plan, as a senior copyist, his daily wage was 50 copper coins. Subtract the 8 copper coins he'd carefully budgeted for daily living, and he cleared 42 copper coins a day. Add the side work Nia kept finding for him, 5 family letters a week, 5 copper coins per letter. At that pace, he'd only have to grind it out for another 6 years to scrape together the enormous sum of 10 gold coins he needed to reach Ostrara. He'd be 24 by then, and in that city, the the richest commercial hub on the whole continent, he was confident he could make a name for himself fast, with a mind centuries ahead of everyone else's. Then marry a sweet, gentle young lady from an alien race. But that was the ordinary man's road. And what if I switched professions? What if I became an adventurer? Even the bottom-rung adventurers only had to kill 8 goblins a day. Going rate, 1 goblin ear trades for 20 copper coins. Take a subjugation quest, hand in 10 sets at once, and the guild throws in an extra 1 silver coin on top. Food, daily weapon upkeep, other supplies, call it 40 copper coins in expenses, which meant a little over 2 years to bank 10 gold coins, and that was just the output of an ordinary adventurer. Lance's eyes drifted to the red entry. 8 kills would leave a normal man wrecked. And me? 30 a day? 50? As long as my spirit holds out, 100 wouldn't be hard. Lance shook his head hard, trying to shake that unhinged thought loose. A man shouldn't get too greedy. Even if I play it safe? Even if I cap it at 18 a day? That's still 1 year to hit the first big goal of my life. And I'd have only just turned 19. 5 extra years of his youth. That was an offer Lance simply could not turn down. System, this is all your fault. Lance buried his face in his hands and let out a long, heavy sigh. The hardest thing in life is stepping out of your comfort zone. He griped about it, sure, but Lance didn't waste a single second acting on it. The very next morning, he handed a leave request to his direct supervisor, Grayson. The Adventurers Guild was an enormous machine. Lance's document recording team sat inside the administrative department, and he was far from the only copyist on the payroll. Grayson was an old hand himself. Out of respect for Lance's late father, and because copyists were owed vacation days anyway, days the workaholic Lance had never once touched, he signed off on the leave without blinking. He'd chosen this road. Now he had to play by its rules. And there was one rule you couldn't get around to register as an adventurer. You had to hold a combat skill at the skilled level, which left Lance one option: the Veterans Guild. As they say, money makes the world go round. A little cash spread around, and he finally unearthed a permanently drunk, long-retired veteran tucked away in a corner of the guild. This shabby-looking middle-aged man turned out to be an elite survivor of the legendary Bloody Iris campaign, and his Castro swordsmanship had climbed all the way to the realm of a master. The Veterans Guild was crawling with hidden masters. You never knew which old man dozing in the sun against a wall used to be a retired professional. Out of respect for Lance's late father, the man cut him a steep discount, 30 silver coins, that was it. But watching his purse, 45 silver coins clawed together over 3 brutal months, deflate on the spot, made Lance's heart ache so badly it felt like it was twitching in his chest. Instructor, handled. Now he needed somewhere to train. Through Nia's connections, Lance quietly tracked down a young lady in the logistics department and locked in the rights to one of the guild's private training rooms. It came loaded with conditions, though. 3 hours a day, after sunset only, plus a 10 copper coin wear and tear fee for every hour. And that was already the at-cost rate for internal staff. Praise be to Nia. Lance made the sign of the cross in his heart, silently. The guild did have a free training ground, wide open to anyone. He wouldn't touch it. Lance had survival instincts sharpened to a razor's edge, and he knew the old saying too well. The tallest tree in the forest is the first one the wind knocks down. If somebody caught him swinging a sword for hours straight without so much as a bead of sweat, he'd be scooped up by the next morning and hauled into some basement for research by an eager young sorceress from a magic system profession. No reason at all to invite that kind of attention. So for the next half-month, Lance threw himself into a training regimen straight out of hell. Every day, the moment work ended, he dove into that sealed-off private training room. Put an ordinary person through swordsmanship drills at that intensity, and they'd be wrecked inside an hour, tops. In a genuine fight to the death, their stamina would be gone in minutes. Lance, though, was a complete anomaly. Thanks to his talent's effect, every time his stamina bottomed out, all he had to do was stop and pull in a few deep breaths, and the drained energy came rushing back like an incoming tide. And here was the pleasant surprise. The line in his talent's description about reduced sensitivity to abnormal statuses worked on mental fatigue too, which meant his mental resilience was through the roof, keeping perfect pace with how fast his body bounced back. which also meant the logistics department had recently found itself scratching its collective head, wondering why the wooden swords and training dummies in that one particular room were suddenly falling apart at record speed. Word even started going around that some professional was running secret sessions in there every single night, long after everyone else had gone home. And it wasn't just the gear taking a beating, his appetite exploded too. Lucky for him, the tavern where Amber worked sat right next door to the guild. Every day the second training ended, Lance would haul his starving carcass straight over. The way he ate, like a famished ghost given one last shot at a hot meal, didn't scare Amber one bit. What did scare somebody was the bill. Lance's wallet trembled every time. Thankfully, Amber was a kind-hearted girl. She'd always set down a plate of meat stacked up like a little mountain, then shrug it off like it was nothing. Leftovers from the evening, she'd say, headed for the trash anyway. She'd been planning to toss them to the stray dogs out in the back alley, but hey, he was sitting right there, so why not? Praise be to Amber, Lance mumbled his thanks somewhere around a mouthful of gorgeous roasted meat. And thanks to this high-intensity training regimen, which honestly bordered on cheating, a notification popped up on his system panel on day 5. Late on the night of the 16th day. Half a month. That's all it took him to cross a swordsmanship threshold most people grind a full year for. The panel flashed again. Name, Lance. Profession, none. Power, 5. Agility, 6. Constitution, 5. Spirit, 7. Perception, 6. Talents, Havagmir's Boiling, red. Ouroboros Ring, red. Skills, Castro Swordsmanship, level 3, skilled. Common Language Reading and Writing, level 3, skilled. Arithmetic, level 4, mastery. This insane stretch of special training could finally wrap up. Tomorrow, when he clocked in, was the day he'd officially register as an adventurer.